2022 represents a new dawn for Formula One. The biggest overhaul the regulations have ever had.
The drivers will love it because they are fighters, like in the Colosseum.
How are you feeling about being in the chair?
Right. There's so much potential for the order to be flipped. It's a step into the unknown.
Okay, I have thoughts. Let's start the show.
Welcome to Cordkillers, the show about watching the stuff you love when you want, where you want, however you want. I'm Tom Merritt.
Hey, I'm Brian Brushwood, and Bryce, if memory serves, there was one type of person who fought in the Colosseum.
Gladiators?
Sure, that would be one word to use for them. Yeah, they didn't have much. They didn't have much choice. They were sort of like trapped and forced to compete against one another.
What are you trying to say about Bryce's favorite series, Drive to Survive, that he forced into the beginning of the show today?
So that was the first look at the new season of Drive to Survive. That's coming to Netflix February 24. This is a big season. They've got Max Verstappen back. He dominated in the 2023 season, but unfortunately he was not in the show in the 2022 season because they didn't like how he was portrayed. Some other storylines that might pop up, including the return of driver Kevin Magnussen due to the invasion of Ukraine. You've also got Ferrari having a strong start and a not great end, and a controversy-laden silly season where all the drivers shuffle around mid-season. So that's coming to Netflix February 24. Did I get either of you guys to watch any Drive to Survive yet?
No, but I must say I want to subscribe to you describing Drive to Survive to me.
Yeah,
like that's a fantastic show.
Yeah.
Well, what else is a fantastic show?
Yeah, speaking of which, Tom, every so often we have a truly extraordinary circumstance. And to the best of your understanding, can you retrace our steps that brought us to this exact moment?
Yes, there was a week when we had our Eyes On segment where you hadn't watched anything, but you were like, you know what I did do was listen to something that was better than watching something. It was called Space 1969. You then got me to listen to it. And after listening to it, I said, you know what? I agree. And then I tweeted something about that. And then Bill Oakley responded. And the next thing you know, Bill Oakley is right here on the show. Bill, thank you for being here.
Ladies and gentlemen, Bill Oakley!
Oh my God! Guys, I'm so excited. Hi.
So if we're going in reverse chronology, let's start with Space 1969. To those who are not familiar, it's an alternate science fiction reality in which we begin with JFK serving out his third term. How did this project? How long had this project been cooking, and how did it become an Audible original?
This is a project that I've had in my head for at least 12 years. And it's like almost all the things I do, it's not appropriate for television. You know, television, I've been working in television for a long time, and it's just the most annoying. Can I curse on this podcast?
Of course.
Yeah.
It fucking sucks. Television business is stupid and it sucks, okay? So the problem is because everybody has to, you have to appeal to the widest possible audience, right? Space 1969 is a triple niche. It is a comedy, it is a sci-fi, and it's a retro thing that requires you to know some history. So that's three different niches that it would have to satisfy to be picked up as a TV show. Now, I also know it would be very expensive given the fact that it's a very complicated story with a lot of special effects and things. So what happened was it was originally a TV idea. Then it was going to be a comic book, but it was too niche even for the world of comic books. And finally, what happened was that I got an offer. A friend of mine began working in Audible. And was like, do you have any projects that you've loved your whole life and you just haven't been able to do? And I was like, yes, I have this project, Space 1969. And it would be great as an audiobook because it won't cost any money. You don't have to pay any money for the special effects, right? And so what happened was they bought it, much to my shock and amazement. Audible bought this thing, and it also wasn't even clear. Like, Audible only does two types of things. One of which is a podcasts. One of which is audio books. This isn't really either. And even to the hours before it went live, they were debating what it was. It's really more of an old, like a radio show. It's an audio show. You know, I wrote it like a Simpsons script. Like those Simpsons are recorded like radio shows, and then the radio shows delivered to the animators. So I did exactly what we did on The Simpsons and wrote it exactly the same way, except with the idea that I had to describe more stuff since the audience would never see it. Anyway, I also added the character. It didn't exist in previous incarnations. The star of the show, Nurse Nancy Kranich. And I was like, from the get-go, I was like, this has to be Natasha Lyonne. She's the only actress in the universe who could do this and make it funny. So I wrote every single line for her voice. And miraculously, we got her to do it. And it came out great. You know, it's my favorite thing I've ever written. I would listen to this. If I hadn't already heard it over 100 times, I would be listening to it over and over and over all the time. It's also because of the nature of this format. Nobody was saying people aren't going to know what Hollywood bread is. People aren't going to know what Nikita Khrushchev is. And so I was able people aren't going to care the Art Buchwald as at this dinner party. And I was like, I'm putting everything in. Everything I've ever wanted to do is going in here. And not once did the people at Audible say, this is too obscure. Nobody's going to notice or care. And that's part of what makes me so happy about this thing, is that we got to do stuff like we got to recreate the sound of the dating game in perfect. We found the one guy in existence who does a perfect impression of Jim Lang from the dating game from 1972. And we got to recreate Laugh-In with people like sketches from Laugh-In, got cast people who'd played Joanne Worley and Goldie Hawn and Alan Seuss and that, like, so anyway. It was really exciting. And the most exciting thing, though, is that people have embraced it to such an extent, because it has taken off. It's, other than stuff created by Matt Groening, it's the most successful thing I've ever worked on. And it continues to have legs in this universe, in Audible. And so that's why I'm very delighted.
So there's a number of very, very bold decisions that you made, not the least of which is writing for a hot actor with a lot of heat that you don't know if you're going to be able to get for the show. Was there at any point as you're writing this dialogue, you know how perfect it'll be for Natasha Lyonne, but I would assume you're also aware of the unlikelihood of being able to definitely land her for the role?
Yes, and it took a long time, and it wasn't easy, and dozens of other actresses were pitched, none of whom would have been the proper. I would have had to rewrite every one of the 4,000 lines in that script to accommodate the stylings of the different actors. So that was the thing. It was a miracle that we got her, and I think part of it was that it didn't take her all that long, and she could do the whole thing from her house.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's also a number of bold story settings that you make and references that, yes, are very, very obscure. Like, for example, one of my comedy partners has written 2 miniseries about the 1960s elections of Nixon versus Kennedy and going into LBJ and so on. So it's like, that's the only reason I knew half of the references in there. Was there ever a moment that you were tempted to pull back? Because I think that the very audacity of the obscure references were exactly what made it land so very, very hard to me.
There was never a moment when I attempted to pull back. I often would say, it's just something I've learned in The Simpsons, is people often appreciate the stuff that, well, in The Simpsons, the question was, is this too stupid to be on the show? And the answer was no. And then it was always the most popular thing in the episode, was the thing that we thought was too stupid. In this case, I was like, is this too obscure? No. Every single one, I was like, it doesn't matter. It's going to be George Plimpton. There's going to be jokes about George Plimpton you will never get unless you're familiar with George Plimpton and the works of George Plimpton. So but there's enough entertainment. That means to say this thing, I don't want to scare people off from this thing. Even if you don't know that stuff, you're still going to love it. Just like people don't get every reference in The Simpsons, but then maybe years later they do. They know about Grover Cleveland's 2 non-consecutive terms, for example, and get that joke that appeared in that George episode. So this will also be, this is stuff. It's history. I wasn't alive for most of this stuff. I was a baby during this stuff, but it happens to be stuff that's of interest to me. So obviously a certain demographic has picked up upon it and enjoyed it, and it's thrilling to me.
Yeah, well, it's similar to throwing out regionalisms, right? If you say something about Emo's Pizza and people in St. Louis get really excited, everyone else in the
Yeah.
audience doesn't feel left out. They're like, oh, pizza. I guess that's a thing that they like. But the people from St. Louis feel really excited that you mentioned it. And I feel like you did that balance with Space 1969. You made an entertaining story that everybody's going to enjoy. But when I certainly felt like when there was that Nixon drop, when there was that Plimpton reference that I got, it made me feel special, even though I'm not special. There's tons of people out there getting those references too. But it's like, wow, that's really unique. That was the fun part for me.
I would say it's rare that a production is entered into with such disregard for whether people will ever get any of it. And that was the blessing that Audible gave me, was they never even for a second said that stuff. And it's also because, as I said, even if you don't get any of the references, you can still enjoy this whole thing
Yeah,
as
exactly.
a sci-fi drama, you know?
Did you get notes of any kind? Were they, too screechy or, talk slower or anything?
I got a few notes, but they were not they were more like, we need a couple more jokes in this scene or something like that. They were very light throughout
Pacing
the whole
stuff. Yeah.
thing.
Okay.
And yeah, they and also the execution of the whole thing, by the way, was also amazing. It was entirely done during the pandemic. Audible had this. Normally, the kind of thing would have been recorded in a studio with the actors going in every day. In this case, they had these big suitcases that they sent like Federal Express to everyone's house, and it was loaded with computer equipment, microphones, and stuff. And you basically set up a recording studio in your house. And I had one
Huh.
right here in this room where I put like mattresses and crap up here to block the sound, and that's how it was done. And the work of my editor Chris Farley and the executive producer Thomas Mann also made this thing. I mean, it was a small team, but everyone was really in love with the project, and we worked really hard to make it come out sound so perfect too.
It definitely
And Darren
does. I,
Vermont
I would
sound
never
editor,
have
too.
guessed that it was recorded in everybody's bedroom.
Yeah, I should say the sound. Our sound designers, Darren Vermont, did an incredible job too. When you listen to this thing on like headphones or whatever, it's like you're in the room. You can tell, different offices have different like different vibrations, like the auras of the air conditioners and stuff. You can tell, like, and there's some scenes that are just blowing away, like Nixon walking through Brooklyn in the pouring rain and being splashed by the cab. You can really hear that. You can feel it that you're there if you listen on headphones.
Natasha Lyonne has a singular gift for kind of an over the top, all of those sort of self referential moments of where you're giving a wink and a nod to the fact that you're doing scene work and explaining like, well, there's no reason for you to have said that, but thank you for setting up the scene or what have you.
Right.
Tell me about just how self-referential you wanted everything to be as you were putting it together, because all of this felt to me the closest to physical comedy in an audio format that I've ever seen. It felt like a classic episode of I Love Lucy or something.
Well, thank you for saying that. I didn't want it to be insanely self-referential, but the fact that there's a narrator who I won't spoil, the narrator who's the main character in the story, who is narrating while participating in the story, is also part of the thing. Like, it's going to be a certain amount of self-referential. I didn't want it to be annoyingly self-referential, so I kept it to maybe one such thing per episode. And I think it was a little sprinkle here and there.
You also do an excellent meta commentary where it feels like the story might be drifting one way, but then you have a character call out like, "What, did you think it was going to be this? Because that would be stupid." And you're like, "Yeah,
Yes.
that would have been stupid." Like, to the best of your ability, tell me about that decision.
I think those were, in many cases, it was just an attempt to add jokes to the scene. It wasn't necessarily a master plan. It was just like, hey, maybe there's a good reference here because this thing doesn't contain any aliens, but it seems like it should in a number of cases, and that's why there's a number of what you're referring to. I think is jokes where people are grateful that there are no aliens and
Right.
are commenting on, "I'm glad I'm not in a story that involves aliens." So that's one of the things you're referring to, I assume. And yes, I did a little bit of that here and there. Just there's a lot of. Let me put it this way: when you're writing a script that is 552 page long. 550 pages, you have to use every card in the deck. So you kind of use, sometimes you're going to do self-referential jokes, sometimes you're going to do physical comedy. Sometimes you're going to do corny stuff. You're going to try everything you can just to fill out the script. It's a lot of writing.
How far did you go looking up things to add, and how much of it was just, as I felt like it was, drawn from your own experiences, memories, nostalgia, things you love, etc.?
About seven. That's a good question too. About 70% of it was just stuff that was already in my head. Other times I had to look up stuff like brands of makeup that were popular in 1969. Mainly the female stuff. Like what would a woman, a fashionable woman, want from Earth in 1969 if she was in space? Well, she'd want this type of Clairol, this type of Maybelline product, this magazine. So a lot of the other stuff I already knew, and that's stuff like the Hollywood bread that my grandmother ate, which comes back over and over and over in that thing. And the Buick Skylark. So I didn't have to look up that much of it. But obviously with the internet, it's extremely easy to do that.
Do you feel like there's an opportunity to for the story to expand it into other formats, whether it be cartoons, television, a movie, you name it?
Well, that's already been discussed a couple different times. In fact, Audible, because now Audible has a division devoted to turning its projects into movies and TV shows. So, but then once again, we encounter the problem that this thing wasn't a TV show to begin with because it's too expensive. Like, I don't know. Would you, if you were the executive, would you be willing to say, I'm going to pay $1.2 million an episode to animate this thing? I don't know. It might be too expensive. It might still be a triple niche, and it's not, and you'll get fired for having made that decision. Now, would I like someone to make that decision? Yes. If anyone's watching who can make that decision, call me right now. But I don't necessarily see it coming around the bend. What I do see coming, and I can't go into too much detail about this, is the next volume, is the sequel to this.
It does end with a fairly open-ended finale to the entire thing, and I got very excited about the possibility of a second season.
Well, I will say the following: it was supposed to be, yes, it wasn't supposed to be a book. It's supposed to be a series, So it is. That's season 1. Season 2, which is titled Space 1972. We're already in negotiations for that. So I hopefully it won't. Hopefully the things will go well, and we'll be seeing that. And I already have the majority of the story worked out for it.
And it will go from things I was dimly aware of to things I remember when that comes out, which I'm very excited about.
Good.
Yeah.
It's only 3 years later, but there's a lot of the culture has shifted somewhat, as you may remember.
Well, my earliest memory was Nixon resigning. Like I remember my parents tried to explain that to me. So yeah, that I've always had a fascination with Nixon, which is a huge part of my appreciation for this story. So I'm looking forward to seeing where it might go down the road for sure.
So
I think you will be surprised. I think you'll be surprised.
Bill,
Good.
It seems like you're in a similar spot. Part of the reason that we do this program is because we want to celebrate independent creators and people who work outside of the traditional sort of ladder-based Hollywood environment. And you have a foot in each of those camps. You have played the Hollywood game to great success, and you've also played the independent game. As a matter of fact, I made the mistake of looking at your Wikipedia before we brought you onto the show, and I suddenly realized, oh my God, he wrote steamed hams. I did. What is that like to be aware of sort of both ways to play the game, and what advice do you have for people who want to follow in your footsteps?
Okay, well, I have a lot I have to say about this.
You have unlimited runway, by the way.
I'm stating the obvious here. There's never been a better time to be an independent creator and not go through traditional channels, ever. Because up till about, 10 years ago, if you wanted to make a TV show, you had to go through traditional channels, right? You had no choice but to go through level after level after level of executives. And because people who, obviously, in their defense, if they're going to spend the money to make your thing, they get to call the shots. Now, if you want to make your own thing without having anybody tell you how to do it, you can do it. You can start an account at YouTube and start tomorrow or tonight, so that's great. Now, the question is, do you want to make any money from it? That's the harder part. And that's the thing that, what you still get from traditional media, for instance, in all of the forms, books and publishing, you can publish your ebook, but maybe nobody will see it. You can do your podcast, but maybe nobody will listen to it. It's the marketing muscle that those places have that you're paying for. Like Netflix, me just tell you sort of the last several shows I worked on uh, got about 6 hours of attention before the tidal wave of crap overwhelmed the crap overwhelmed it. And that's the way that things work. It's not the same way that it was in 1997 or whatever, when people know your show. People have heard of your show now. People might have seen your show now. If somebody's heard of your show, it's a miracle. So that's part, like, anyway, what I was just saying is, yes, there is money in the old media. However, and old media, I'm including streaming services. However, there's an endless series of annoyances. We have to sell the product to them, which is a Herculean effort to begin with to get anything sold. Because yes, you think there's so many more streaming services, it doesn't matter. There's still that much more content being pitched to them all day long, every day. It's not any easier to get stuff on than it was in 1975 or whatever. It's hard. And once you get stuff on, they're going to give you notes up the wazoo. You're going to do it their way, not your way, unless you're Ryan Murphy or whatever, or Shonda Rhimes. And you're going to get, and ultimately, what's most likely to happen is you'll get 6 hours of attention in one day before they move on to the next thing, and that's because there's such a titanic amount of stuff out there. So the best thing that one could do, if wanted to break into this thing, would be to try both ways simultaneously. Would be to have your show that you want to pitch or whatever, or try to get into, try to build a career in traditional media, including streaming services, while also building your own brand online on your YouTube channel, with your Patreon, with your podcast or whatever. Because eventually, if you're lucky, those things will cross over. But if not, in the meantime, you could have 1 million followers on YouTube. I know people who could have a TV show, but they don't want it. Because they have 1 million followers on YouTube and they're making a lot of money already, and they're calling every shot. Why should they go to Netflix or HBO Max and make slightly less money to have somebody tell them what to do all the time? Yes. And I would say, your odds at this point, of becoming a famous television producer are just about the same as your odds of having 1 million followers on YouTube. And which one, yes, there's a lot more money to be made as a famous television producer, but that's a difficult path to follow. Whereas you could probably become a huge YouTube personality with about the same amount of effort.
Is that thinking what got you to start doing the food reviews and the Steamed Ham Society? Or was it more like you just wanted to do it and then you realized, hey, this fits that model?
It's the latter in that case. I think I just wanted to do it for kicks. And then it I would say that almost immediately it became very clear that it was far more fun than working in regular TV, because I think the subtext of this entire conversation is going to be how I'm annoyed by the gatekeeper system. I love being able to say, I'm going to go make a video about the new Burger King Mexican Whopper, and 3 hours later it's up there, and it has more views than the show I worked on Netflix. That's the thing. It's like you're getting an audience. Now, am I getting any money for it? No, but I'm getting the same number of people watching it, and the ancillary benefits, as in like people signing up for the Steamed Ham Society, or me getting to host the actual food TV show, are immense. So that's like, anyway, I love doing my own stuff. It's far more fun than doing stuff in TV. There's some fun stuff in TV. The Simpsons was very fun because it was in the rarefied position of nobody being able to give us any notes, and we were able to do, and nobody paying attention. So Matt Groening and Jim Brooks were nominally the bosses, but they were not there at all, and so we just did whatever we wanted for several years, and that worked out well. But you don't get that very often in TV.
So before we come back to your independent work now, I would love just a little bit of a hint of whether or not you were aware at the time that your work was going to have the longevity that it would, and that it would become, decades before most people had heard the word meme. You were writing these sketches that were going to become part of the cultural identity of the globe on The Simpsons. What was that like? And was there a moment where you suddenly realized, oh, I'm doing it, whatever it is?
We didn't realize the internet barely existed at the time that we were there. So like it was AOL, that kind of thing. So we were not aware of the whole meme thing or YouTube hadn't been invented, whatever. What we were aware of was that we had grown up watching reruns of comedies. That was everybody at The Simpsons. That's how they got the way they were. They watched I Love Lucy over and over and over because that was the only thing that was on TV. They watched Brady Bunch over and over, Green Acres, Mary Tyler Moore, Dick Van Dyke. And so we knew that the show was already going to be syndicated. So we knew that these shows would run over and over and over for decades. What we didn't realize is that there would be this whole new world of people appreciating them online remixing them on YouTube or even, or memification, the memification of them, which nobody even knew, as you said. That's one of the reasons we didn't put a lot of timely references in. It was always one of those things like we only put a very few things where we said the year or things that could be traced directly to one year or whatever. Or even celebrity, at least when Josh and I were there, we didn't put celebrities on that were celebrities then, really, because we wanted these to live forever, just like I Love Lucy did and shows like that, where it didn't feel that dated other than being in black and white because the situations were kind of universal and they weren't all about whatever, and they weren't all about the trendiness of 1956 or whatever it was,
Yeah, Tennessee Ernie Ford on I Love Lucy was not funny because Tennessee Ernie Ford was the guest. It was the vamping, right?
It lasted, and that's how all of us, I assume, were introduced to Mr. Tennessee Ernie Ford, who still is a very entertaining figure today, and was very funny. We had no idea that he was he's a huge singer back then.
Man, before we move on, Tom, is there any other, I feel like we have this opportunity to ask questions to a legend. Can you think of anything else?
Bill, what should we ask you?
You should ask me more about this whole food thing that I want to discuss. Okay, so the food thing, just to make sure everyone understands, my hobby, and now I would say about half of my career, is doing food-related stuff, as I've always been interested in food, and not necessarily your Michelin Guide type food, more like groceries and snack food and things like that. And that's what I do for about half of my time. I make videos about them, but I also, do other stuff, write essays and things like that about food, snack food, groceries, fast food. They're on my Instagram at that Bill Oakley. They're on my Twitter, same address. And I also have this club for people who are interested in that. It's called the Steamed Ham Society, named after the Steamed Ham sketch. SteamedHamSociety.com. You can sign up if you like talking. If you're the kind of person who's like, you got to try this chicken sandwich I found at this roadside stand in Tennessee, or did you see the new flavor of Doritos? They're absolutely terrible. That type of thing. This is the home for you. We have a Discord, 24/7 stuff. We have live streams and there's a special level for Simpsons fans too, where we have live streams with Simpsons people. We've had John Beatty, David X. Cohen, Dan Graney, and other Simpsons luminaries on our Simpsons live stream. We have merchandise, all that stuff. It's fun.
I would imagine most people, upon hearing about this, would believe there's some level of ironic detachment. But hearing you talk about it, it seems just 100% present and sincere. Like, no, we just really want to talk about fast food.
It is. In fact, I've been on an NPR twice, and both times they had to say repeatedly, this is not some sort of put on. It's not some sort of Andy Kaufman-esque thing he's doing. He actually does like going to McDonald's, especially for the NPR audience. You can understand why they wouldn't understand that.
Yeah. You're doing the mayonnaise chips comparison on that's available for patrons. I saw.
That's a very timely reference. Yes, that's chip. Somebody just sent me that one of the Steamed Ham said. I'll show you. Hold on.
Yeah, because this is one of my favorite things. Is finding weird flavors.
This is where I tap out.
Let me say that yes, one of the members of the Steamed Ham Society sent me these, which came from Thailand. And look at this. They got those. Got mayonnaise flavored chips.
Oh!
Can you believe that? That's going to be. I've never heard of such a thing.
The reason I'm upset is now Bryce has seen it, and now I know it's going to show up on our other comedy show. And now, oh my God! All right.
I'm very.
I can't wait to try those.
Yeah, I'm looking forward. You have to be a Steamed Ham Society patron to get the first look, right? Is that how you're doing it?
Yeah. Well, about half the stuff I do is only for that, and the rest I do is for the general public and put on Instagram.
Excellent.
So this Patreon, explain to me this Patreon thing. What's that?
You guys have a Patreon, right? You know, you
Okay,
know
busted.
what it is.
Fine. Yes, that was a clumsy lead-in to point out that you can keep our show loud, live, and independent by going to patreon.com/Cordkillers. You'll get your own RSS feed. You'll get access to our exclusive After Talk segments. You'll get to hear everything all in one bite-sized gorge fest.
Yeah.
Or an RSS feed.
Or an
Listen,
RSS feed.
When you're done, patronizing patreon.com/Steamed Ham Society, you're going to have money left. You're not going to give them all your money. So whatever you have left.
Well, maybe. You might want to give me all your money.
Yeah.
There's one level.
Actually, I was about to say, I have a
$2
feeling
for
that
us.
I would give all my money to Steve's Hams. I
And
would put them in my will.
if that's the way it goes, for sure.
I do have
But
an extremely expensive level for people who want me to read their scripts and give them notes on them.
Oh,
That
wow,
level costs $1,000 a month. But
So
that's
once you do that, once you've done that, sold your script based on Bill's advice, then come back to patreon.com/Cordkillers and support us. And Brian, tell them why.
I just did, but mainly, maybe we should talk about how to watch.
No, tell them why again. Okay, fine. Let's do how to watch.
Yeah. Because you get the things. That's why.
Netflix announced earnings Thursday, but started with a bombshell that Reed Hastings has stepped down as co-CEO, but Ted Sarandos is not left lonely. COO Greg Peters is now the new co-CEO alongside Ted Sarandos. Hastings will remain as executive chairman of the board too, so he'll still be kicking around. In a blog post about the move, Hastings said that Sarandos was promoted to co-CEO in July 2020 and Peters to COO, partly because of a plan. They had a succession plan. Hastings said he will spend more time on philanthropy now. He's been wanting to do this, and now's the time. It was a good quarter to go out on, too. Analysts had expected a rise of 4.57 million subscribers, and Netflix almost doubled that. They added 7.66 million in Q4. They now have 230.75 million total subscribers. Every market grew. It wasn't one of those ones where the U.S. went down, but enough people in Asia subscribed to make up for it. The U.S. and Canada grew the least with 910,000 new subscribers. Europe and the Middle East grew the most with 3.2 million new subs. The company met analyst revenue estimates with $7.85 billion in Q4. They missed on earnings. Netflix also thinks its ad-supported tier is off to a quote-unquote solid start and expects it will bring in about $3 billion in revenue this year. New co-CEO Greg Peters said engagement on that platform is comparable to similar users on the non-ad plans. And the company also followed up on its plans to add a path to paid sharing of accounts, saying those methods will roll out more broadly later in Q1. Netflix's terms of service have always prohibited sharing the account outside of the household, but Netflix has been increasing its methods of detection while testing a way to pay extra to add an out-of-household account. Netflix also plans to offer a way to keep your profile data when you start that new account, making it easier to switch from a shared account. Bad news if you're sharing an account, Brian, but good news if you're a Netflix stockholder.
Yeah, I can't help but notice that, having co-CEOs is a fairly unusual move to begin with. And you would think that having excellent news about subscriber growth would be a good time to go down to one CEO. Should I read into the tea leaves on what it means for them to stick with co-CEOs or no?
I don't know. Co-CEO did not work out well for RIM. Which made BlackBerry, but there have been some pretty good co-CEOs in a lot of the Asian companies, and you don't hear about the co-CEOs usually that don't do well. So I don't think on the face of it you can say it's bad, and certainly it hasn't been horrible for Netflix. I think the idea is you have an operations guy like Hastings and now Peters, and then you have a content guy, which is Sarandos, and somehow they are able to, divide things up and not get in each other's way. I don't know if you even have a perspective on that, Bill, but do you?
I think this whole business is going on the tubes. I say this. I can't look, guys. As I'm sure you know, there's way too many TV shows out there. There's no, and people aren't even like the new Netflix's most popular things are like reruns of The Office and stuff, right? So like, you're competing with every TV show that ever existed. Making new TV shows is very expensive. And I don't think that we're going to be in an environment much longer where you're going to have 2,000 new TV series every year like we have now. And
Yeah.
places, I think you're going to see things vanish. Like I don't know about Peacock, but I think a number of streaming services are going to vanish or be absorbed into other streaming services, and we're going to have a couple because it's like how many people watch Netflix, but a large majority of people are still watching TikTok or whatever instead of actually watching TV anyway. And I think that some people have gotten the message that this is a Ponzi scheme, and it's finally the edges are starting to finally collapse in the giant Ponzi scheme of streaming television.
Well,
I don't know if you guys agree, but that's my opinion.
No. I think that from our outsider perspective, it looks an awful lot like what Netflix has been attempting to do is fractal-like expand into all of the tendrils into increasingly specific niches as far as they can. But I do believe you're 100% right that there's an upper limit as far as at some point the budgets don't match. You can't hire the writing talent, the production talent, the acting talent in order to really make them happen. If I were smarter, I would try to make the guessing game of what that peak moment is, but I just don't know it.
Yeah.
I agree.
Somebody's going to make a lot of money shorting Netflix stock and other stock, but I don't know exactly how or when.
I agree with you that the consolidation is inevitable. And we've talked a lot on this show previously about the sort of the ticking clock where Comcast is waiting for some of the restrictions it had when it bought NBC to run out. They're also waiting to resolve the ownership of Hulu. And then once those things go away, I think there's going to be a feeding frenzy. And the people with the most money are going to land at the end as the winners. Folks with the most money right now are folks like Apple and maybe Amazon if things keep going for them okay. Comcast has a lot of money. Disney, they got some money. I think Netflix's bet is that they can create something else like a video game business fast enough that they even if the TV stuff starts to suffer, they'll have enough money to throw at it. It's just a matter of whether they can pull it off in time or not.
Yeah, that's good thinking. I think you're right. And I think we're going to see, like, obviously Disney's not going anywhere. And Disney Plus may be revamped in a few years or whatever, but Disney's going to be around. Some version of all these other studios will be around. But streaming TV is going to, in 15 years, what we're currently is going to seem delightfully antique and crazy. And, it's going to be like CD Walkman. We're going to look at like a CD Walkman that plays a compact disc and laugh at the way things were.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, over the last, I think we've been doing versions of this show for almost 14 years now. And one of the things that we wished for was, wouldn't it be great if all of the channels just split off from cable and we could buy them all individually? And then we got that and we're like, good God, this is horrific. We don't like this at all. I wish they would consolidate into bigger mega groups. And now, strangely, 14 years later, we're like, what if they were all available on something? Let's call it cable.
I think we're...
Right.
I think where we're headed is probably 2 or 3 platforms, and then everyone's going to be complaining like, man, it's like broadcast TV all over again. You only have 3 channels. And gosh, I remember the old days when we had 50 different streaming services to choose from, because it just always goes like that. We always think the grass is greener on the other side of the fence, right?
Yep.
All right, let's move on and talk about what to watch in Under Surveillance.
Not like real estate. It's all about location.
Disney Plus released a trailer for The Mandalorian, returning on March 1st. March 1st. I think they both work. Brian, what do you think?
The fist of the rebellion is strong in this post-rebellion story. It's fine. Watching it reminded me of just how good Andor is. I feel like something broke in me. Now that I've seen Andor, it's the new standard by which I judge all things Star Wars. Bill, are you following the various spin-offs of Star Wars related stuff?
No, I'm one of those weirdos who is like, the best movie George Lucas ever made is American Graffiti, and I'm not that interested in his other work. So, no, I'm not. Sorry.
Fair enough.
Yeah, this definitely looks like The Mandalorian, and as somebody who enjoyed the Mandalorian story, I'm looking forward to more Mandalorian. But I know what you mean, Brian, where they're doing so many other interesting things that it's not as like, oh my gosh, water in the desert as maybe it used to be.
It's a little cartoonish. I don't think it's far off from what Mandalorian has always been. I don't think it's far off from what Book of Boba Fett was. But seeing it in a post-Andor moment, I'm like, oh, you know what? Mandalorian was still pretty cartoony.
Well, let me lay this one on you. Amazon released a teaser for season 2 of Invincible. The teaser is a conversation between Mark Grayson and Alan the Alien, in which at one point Alan asks what Mark has been doing, and he says, and I'll quote, writing, designing, storyboarding, voice acting, key posing, in-betweening, cleaning up, color slapping, compiling the whole thing, and all that for, roughly thousands of shots. So no, there were no scenes from season 2 of Invincible in this. Invincible coming to Amazon Prime Video in late 2023. Bill, I have to imagine some of that sounded familiar.
Yes, although fortunately I didn't have to do those things. That we had a staff of employees to do most of the things that were listed in that thing. But yeah, I mean, that's why I said, as I listed a number of times already in this thing, animation is a lot of work and it's very expensive. And even with the addition of computers, it's still not. And well, let me say this: I don't think we're that far away from AI being able to do a lot of animation, which is going to be unfortunate, and then it's going to put a lot of people out of work. But I bet you that a fairly decent animation is going to be like within a year or two, you're going to find these things. The things that we were all amazed by 2 months ago that were doing, Illustrator quality portraits of us and whatnot, are going to be able to animate stuff, and I'm sure that's right around the corner.
Yeah, I think so. Strangely, this little vignette, less cartoony than Mandalorian.
Than the Mandalorian. I liked the bit where they kind of leaned into like, why did it take so long for season 2 to come out? And they're like, this is why. It's because it's hard, because it takes a long time. Apple released a trailer for Hello Tomorrow, described as Madman with jetpacks. Billy Crudup plays a person who runs a firm that sells real estate on the moon during a version of the 1950s that has jetpacks and hover cars and stuff like that. That is coming to Apple TV February 17th.
Hey, Bill, how soon do you plan to sue them for stealing your cool ideas?
I saw that and I didn't like it. I saw that, like, let me tell you this, Apple TV is too. They also did For All Mankind, which came out as well, which has also some elements of Space 1969. This, fortunately, doesn't. By the time I finish with Space 1972, it's going to be a different universe anyway, because it's going to take me 2 years to write it. So I'm not that worried about it, but I did see that and I was annoyed.
I believe it. Although I did get the impression
They can do whatever they want. It has nothing to do with me. I don't think they ripped me off at all, because this kind of thing has been around for years. But the fact that it's on Apple TV is a little annoying.
From what little we got from the teaser trailer, it looks an awful lot like they're running some kind of Ponzi scheme, some kind of scam or whatever.
Moon real estate Ponzi scheme. Yeah.
It didn't seem like there was a lot of actual space. I didn't see any space in this thing.
No, I don't think so. The only crossover it has with Space 1969 is that there is technology developed in this universe that was not actually developed in real life, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I guess the positive for you could be that if this became a big enough hit, maybe that would increase interest in Space 1969. At least I would hope so.
This is not going to become a big hit.
Yeah,
I don't believe it. I don't think it's going to become a big hit, because it's a niche. It's a retro sci-fi thing that is like it's never good.
Well, for the reasons
I don't want. I'd rather.
Yeah. No, but it's going to face the same challenges that you were describing earlier in the show. Yeah, absolutely. Brian, do you have any shows that you want to point people towards that are coming to streaming or television in the United States of America?
Indeed, I do, Tomas Marit. Hacking the System was a show that 10 years ago, Jason Murphy and I started conceiving and pitching. It eventually became a National Geographic original series, and it is joining the Disney Plus family this in 2 days on January 25th. If you want to learn all of the life hacks and see the ways that criminals think and see the origins of what later would become the modern rogue, it's right there for you to dazzle your eyes with.
Fantastic. All right. We have a segment called Eyes On, where we talk about at least one thing we've been watching lately to give folks ideas of something they might want to find that's pretty good. And Bill, thank you for participating. What do you got your eyes on these days?
I watched this show called Gogglebox. It's since Better Call Saul went off the air, it's my favorite show, and I've been watching it for years. It's not an American show. I think part of the thing we've learned is that you can watch TV from all over the world. It doesn't have to at any time you want. It doesn't have to be something that's new or whatever. My daughter installed this thing Plex, which I'm sure you guys know about, which has enabled us to watch everything from all over the world at once. Gogglebox has been my favorite show other than Better Call Saul for years, and it's a British show. which is footage of people watching TV. It sounds boring, but it's not. It's people watching TV so that you get the week, what everybody watched in England. They have little clips of it, and then they have people reacting, and they have they've certainly curated group of people that we've all grown to love over the years, and about 14 maybe different families, or brother, sister, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever, watching and reacting, and it's very entertaining. And not only that, it gives you a nice digest of what everybody watched watched on TV in England that week. So there's reality shows, there's some Game of Thrones type stuff, or things of that nature, Netflix events, and but the people reacting to it are very entertaining. And I know this show has been tried in the U.S. and failed a couple different times because the people simply weren't that good, and they get like VH1 level celebrities, who also aren't that entertaining. But I think that this show's been on for 20 seasons, I think, now on Channel 4 in England, and they've really mastered the edit so that this show is entertaining, and we all love the characters, and it's fun. It's fun to catch up on what people are watching in other countries.
How do they navigate the licensing requirements about the copyrighted content? Do we hear it, or we just hear it described, or?
No, we see it. We see the show. We see the clips of the shows, and I assume that's part of it. I can't imagine that anybody in England, any shows, are turning them down. I mean, this show's pretty popular, so I think that you get a lot of. I would assume they just don't. If the show is not going to license the clips, they don't watch it. They don't tell the whole cast to watch it tonight. They say everybody needs to sit down and watch, So You Think You Can Dance tonight or whatever, because we're going to use that. And so I assume shows that don't want to license clips are not even in the cards.
Right. Gotcha. That makes sense. Am I wrong in remembering there was a Bill Oakley on Better Call Saul, since you brought up that show?
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
Okay. Yes. For the entire run of the series, the prosecutor that often comes head to head with Saul is Bill Oakley, is his name, and he's kind of a put upon guy who also likes junk food, and he actually took on in the last couple episodes. He became incredibly. I don't want to spoil it for people who haven't yet seen it, but he became incredibly prominent.
Yeah.
And yes, that's him. The actor Peter Dyseth is a great guy, and in fact, he appeared on my Instagram on my Steamy Awards last year as the other Bill Oakley, and it was great. He's a great guy, very funny actor. He's been in a number of different shows, but people know Bill Oakley now a lot more than they used to because of his major appearances in the past, the series finales of Better Call Saul.
Was that a total coincidence, or was that a bit of a wink and a nod?
I don't. No, they were one time when those guys were interviewed, and they said it was based on Charles Oakley, the basketball player. But I don't believe that, because I know I was working with Sony at around the time that this became a show, and I'm sure that my name was known to the people at Sony because of my various run-ins with them, and some very negative. And so I don't know whether the name was picked for that reason. I'm a little skeptical that it was based on Charles Oakley, the basketball player.
Mm-hmm. Does Charles Oakley like junk food as much as the two Bill Oakleys?
I haven't heard much about him recently. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But I do know that Bill Oakley, there's another guy named Bill Oakley who is the head of the National Pizza Expo convention, which is another crazy coincidence.
That's funny. Yeah, that's great. Brian, what have you been watching?
So we're coming up on kind of a cool left turn. For a while, YouTube has been rolling out their shorts format to compete with TikTok. And right now, none of those shorts are monetizable. And rumors are that sometime in February, they'll start doing revenue sharing agreements for YouTube shorts. We've been carving up old segments from our past 10 years of content. The tireless work of Bryce Neshcom Castillo has been a hero for all this. But I finally dove in and wanted to experience it as a consumer. And oh my goodness, channel flipping is back. That's a fun experience. The only thing I didn't care for is constantly trying to figure out who YouTube thinks I am, because whoever it is it thinks I am thinks that 1/3 of all of my content should be Pink Floyd covers. It was very distracting, very confusing. But I think we're having a cool moment in terms of, YouTube attempting to become a dominant player in both the long form and short form content.
Yeah, my wife has run into the algorithm on YouTube throwing her Pat Benatar, and she's like, "Why is it putting Pat Benatar?" It's like, I don't know. It thinks you might like Pat Benatar. It wants to
Because
see if
love
you
is a
bite.
battlefield.
Yeah, exactly. I have enjoyed the return of Servant to Apple TV Plus. This is Tony Bascalop's show. M. Night Shyamalan's name is on it too as an executive producer, but it's Bascalop that's doing most of the show running, from what we understand. And it has changed a lot. It is a really interesting horror show in an entirely different way than it was at season 1. So if you're thinking like, oh, right, this is the premise about the baby and stuff, that's almost entirely in the background at this point. And it's a fascinating story, and I'm enjoying the return. So if you are somebody who was into watching Servant, you can start watching the new episodes. They're back now on Apple TV Plus, or if you're like, oh, right, I meant to get around to that, you can start back in now, and new episodes will be coming out weekly. Bryce, what should we be on the lookout for?
Hey, we got a limited series recommendation from Ellen today, who writes, "Hello! I had to recommend a 4-part and very bingeable documentary on Netflix called Pepsi, Where's My Jet? It's a gem. It's about a true story of a young man in the 90s who, with the help from an older, wiser, and wealthier friend, decides to take Pepsi up on a TV advertisement to redeem a military fighter jet for 7 million Pepsi points." That's all Ellen's going to say. Watch it. She loves Cordkillers and hopes to be able to support it soon. Thank you, Ellen. Yeah, I heard about this when they dropped the trailer about this, I want to say a couple months ago. I thought this is an interesting one. I did a little bit of the Bryce slice. I Bryce sliced it a little bit here. I knew Ellen wrote it about
You jumped ahead, yeah.
I knew like he wanted to buy the jet, and they didn't realize
And somebody
1 point
in the
was
ad
10
company
cents.
thought that 7 million, that seems like a big number.
Yeah, I'll say I jumped into the final episode today. I hadn't seen the other 3 because I'm a lunatic about this. And I was A, partly lost, because B, they start by talking in the Philippines about the tragic Pepsi number fever campaign, which you want to talk about a advertising campaign gone wrong. Look up the number fever campaign. That one has a body count. So
holy moly.
So a lot going on here on Pepsi. Where's My Jet? Thank you, Ellen, for this. There are 4 parts of the streaming now on Netflix. If you've got something we should be on the lookout for, please email it to us at cordkillers@gmail.com. Thank you.
Don't forget, folks, that Brian and I do other things besides Cordkillers the rest of the week. We don't just go into a closet or a freezer. We keep doing other stuff.
Well,
One of the things I do,
but it's Bill Oakley's closet, and we're very quiet the entire
and we
time.
do other things in
no.
there. Yeah, is the thing.
awesome.
Folks, if you want to check out one of the things that I do, it's Know a Little More at knowalittlemore.com. I take 10-20 minutes to try to explain something, usually a technology topic based on stuff we do at Daily Tech News Show. But recently I did one about the word okay. The most recent episode is about the word computer and how it meant a human person for most of its existence, and how it came to mean the electronic device now. Check that out, knowalittlemore.com, on your computer. Brian, they'll need a computer.
Yep. And of course, if you want to learn about computers, you need a computer, which is why you should go to our friends over at doghousesystems.com/rogue, ROGUE. They keep us swimming in high quality computer products, and their customer service is absolutely unmatched. You're going to love everything. You're going to get something extra. We'll get credit. Make sure to go to doghousesystems.com/rogue, ROGUE.
Let's move on to the front lines.
Front lines.
Netflix rolled out a new UI. We got a couple new UIs here. The Netflix UI for its iOS app now features large card graphics for new movies and series. Also makes it easier to filter category by content and switch user profiles. And YouTube TV has a new interface for its library section. It lets you see more shows at once and some simplified filters. The live guide also has recommendations at the top, as well as showing more channels and descriptions of the programming.
And Google Home's app, the TV remote, can now works with Google-compatible devices like Roku, Samsung, and LG TVs. The controls include playback, inputs, and volume.
Janko Reckers wrote in his Low Pass newsletter that Samsung is in talks to bring its Samsung TV Plus Fast service, that's free ad-supported streaming TV, to TCL TVs. So right now they're only on Samsung stuff, but this would be coming to other stuff that isn't from Samsung. So like Pluto TV or the Roku channel, Samsung TV Plus has a collection of channels and on-demand TV supported by ads. And Samsung has found it does really well, unlike a lot of other Samsung in-house brands. Up until now, you could only get it on phones and TVs from Samsung, but it looks like it might be coming to others.
And finally, as part of a bankruptcy proceeding of the parent company, Cineworld, Regal Cinemas announced it's going to shut down 39 theater locations in the U.S. starting February 15th. Many of those are locations Regal added after ArcLight closed down.
Yeah, my ArcLight became a Regal, and now it's going to become a nothing again. Maybe a racquetball court.
Maybe it was always a nothing.
All right, a few other notes here before we get out. Meryl Streep's going to join the cast of Only Murders in the Building for its third season. Warner Brothers TV is in talks to make a limited series about the life of Buster Keaton, starring Rami Malek and directed by Matt Reeves. NCIS Los Angeles will air its series finale May 14th, ending a 14-season run. I think that makes it the 5th longest CBS show. Amazon signed a deal to distribute sports channel DAZN as an add-on to Prime Video, starting in Spain and Germany. The Reels channel has reached a deal to become the TV home of Major League Wrestling starting February 7th. Apple announced that Ted Lasso Season 3 is coming to Apple TV Plus this spring. No specific date. Netflix will adapt the young adult novel Geek Girl into a 10-part series. The book's about a teenager plucked from geeky obscurity to begin a modeling career. Paramount released a trailer for Scream 6, first Scream without any Neve Campbell, but with Hayden Panettiere. Scream 6 coming to theaters March 10th. And Disney Plus reported wrapped filming on Star Wars Skeleton Crew, which stars Jude Law and tells the story of kids lost in the universe. Takes place in the same timeline as The Mandalorian, Brian.
I got to be honest, really, the Ted Lasso jumps out the most. I cannot wait for that to happen. Bill, any of these stories pique your interest?
It's the Buster Keaton. I'm shocked that something that sounds so potentially unprofitable is being made, and I'm delighted that they're taking that risk to do it. I'm interested. The story of Buster Keaton is very weird.
The fact that like he straight up could have died during so many different of those stunts, and also Rami Malek is somebody, what a chameleon, the way he's able to take on so many different roles. Buster Keaton is not somebody that most people in my generation thinks as kind of a punk rock juggler, acrobat, stunt person. But I would love that story to come out.
Absolutely, and I think part of the thing that I just recently learned myself is that also everybody loved Charlie Chaplin, but apparently, I guess he wasn't nearly as funny. I've barely seen either. Buster Keaton is very funny, and I've seen some of his stuff, whereas Charlie Chaplin is a lot more maudlin and a lot more kind of sappy, and that was why I think it apparently annoyed Buster Keaton all the way to his grave that Charlie Chaplin was so immensely popular and Buster had been basically forgotten.
Well, I hope that one works out too, because I'm with both of you. I think that would be fascinating if they make it. I certainly would watch, and I hope they do. Let's finish up with that dispatch from the front. Our Patreon boss, David in Fond du Lac, Wisconsin, writes, "Hi, Bryce, Brian, Tom, and Bill." He said guest, but I'll fill that in. Briefly, I never successfully played the game Last of Us on my PS3. I only ever played the first 10 minutes, never took the time or effort to keep going. Per Brian's advice in the past, I watched a 4.5-hour video of the game remastered on YouTube. I recently did this as a YouTube Premium subscriber over the weekend. Started on Friday, finished on Sunday. I treated the video as episodic television instead of binging it all at once. Overall, I finally get why this game resonated with so many of people over the last 10 years. I was okay with the changes made to the story for episode 1 of the HBO Max series. The second episode disappointed me with the changes, and I felt the cliffhanger pacing at the end was too fast with 7 episodes left. I'll keep watching along with Cordkillers, and I look forward to what everyone else has to say on episode 2 and the eventual rest of the series. Of course, we're discussing Last of Us in Spoilerin time. If you're a patron, you get that early, and it's also available in the feed. Brian, what'd you think?
I love that we are... I love remix culture, mashup culture. I love anything that involves as many humans changing and tweaking things as possible. And the idea that a playthrough of a video game, of course, will never be one for one the experience of playing the video game, but instead it will be colored and experienced by, whether it's a 14-year-old that I've never met or a popular person who's I'm watching live, the more of those interesting questions that allow me to meditate on the nature of art writ large, the happier I am. So I'm glad that the advice landed. I'm glad that he watched the original video game, and I'm glad that for having done so, he now has a hot take on what annoys him about the difference between one format versus the HBO Max original.
Bill, I'm curious if you're caught up in The Last of Us fervor or not.
I intend to start watching it possibly as soon as tonight. I have heard good things about it, and it does sound like something that is not going to annoy me, which is a high bar for keeping it clear.
It certainly treats the viewer with respect, which is not something you could say about every video game adaptation that is out there.
It sounds like fun, and also it doesn't sound like it's going to get boring, which I'm afraid, because it's already been so thoroughly worked out as a video game. It doesn't sound like they're going to run off the rails and start boring everybody like a number of streaming at 1 hours have done in the past couple years.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Bill, first of all, thank you for making Space 1969. It was thoroughly enjoyable. I loved every second of it. So let me just thank you directly for that.
Oh, and where should people go to experience it?
Well, go to Audible. If you have an Audible app, or go to audible.com, or you just Google search Space 1969, it will lead you there. And I would appreciate you buying it, and if you like it, leaving a review, because the reviews are the coin of the realm on Audible. And the more reviews we get, the better we do, and the more likely I'm to get a good amount of money for Space 1972. So
yes,
so do me that favor.
Yes, please do that. And before we let you go, if people want to follow what you do, if they want to join the Steamed Ham Society, where should they go?
If you want to follow what I do, by either food or not, go to my Instagram or my Twitter, that Bill Oakley. If you want to join the Steamed Ham Society, go to steamedhamsociety.com. Very simple. And I look forward to having you there. It is a lot of fun. Again, this is for people who are interested in talking about food or hearing about food, reading about food all the time, or Simpsons people who want to do that as well, or people who want to pay a lot of money to have me read their script and give them notes on it, which I don't like to do, but I'm happy to do it for $1,000.
Everybody's got a price. I don't blame you.
Yeah.
Bill, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us, man. This is really fun.
It has been a pleasure. It is a blast, and I was thrilled to be able to talk about not only my show, but also about Gogglebox, which has been my secret obsession for 5 or 6 years now.
Fantastic. Folks, our website is cordkillers.com. Our email address is cordkillers@gmail.com. And you can catch us doing this show live on twitch.tv/Night Attack, Mondays at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific. We'll talk to you next time.
Hey, Tom Merritt, what's going on?
I'm just hanging out here watching this scroll go by. What are you doing?
Trying to set up a bit where we thank our beautiful, beautiful patrons, all these wonderful names.
I'm sorry, I'm too distracted looking at these beautiful, beautiful patron names going by. Look at that one. I mean, if you wanted to be one of these people, patreon.com/cordkillers would be the place to go.
I mean, they're scratching our itch, like, because we're addicted.
As long as it's consensual, like,
we're addicted to their money.
And love. Might as well face it.
Well, God damn it.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.